Here are some things I discovered living in Indiana that I was not ever able to publish when I was going to get back into news and journalism on my own webpage, my own YouTube channel. The first one is there's government fraud going on for taxes within your local governments. As far as the city I lived in, Portage, Indiana, the money was disappearing, and they refused to ever allow me to look at the finances, which is, of course, a right of a civilian or a citizen or a constituent, whichever you want to call it. They even responded to me by putting up a graph on the Portage, Indiana website showing funding, which was a pie chart that was all one solid color, and then it showed another circle saying funding accounted for. Serious. Funding accounted for, another solid circle. And I asked them about it. I laughed, and when they hung up, they removed it the next day, and then they just ignored me, and they've been ignoring me for the past 8 years. When it comes to state taxes, agencies that people are paying taxes for do not exist. There is one woman in a single room with multiple phones in it for different agencies, and she just picks up. She doesn't even take notes. She picks up, she listens to them and says, "Thank you for letting us know," and hangs up. But that single woman is technically something like 40 agencies. So the money for those agencies disappearing, and that's why there's no investigations and consumer right fraud or anything like that. Then she doesn't even know. I asked her personally. We finally had a conversation when I called the fifth agency to report insurance fraud. She she picked up the phone all on the same day. She's like, "Hi, me again." I said, "You got to be kidding me." And at that point, we had a conversation, and she just knew someone in the government. She was related to them, and that's how she got in that position. And she got paid very little money just to answer phones, just to shut people up. And this is what she told me. And I looked into getting the finances as far as where that money is, which should always be readily available. But in the state of Indiana, nobody looks into anything. Citizens here just take it up the butt and they don't do anything. And I know that's hard to believe because out of millions of people, you think if there is 100 people, that's not possible. How could there be millions of people and all of them just be like not care? It happens here. People don't care. No one's ever looked into it. I'm the only one. It's because I'm not from here. So yeah, there's that. The next thing I found was what I learned at this point was to contact federal agencies. So federal agencies that you know exist that are in each state. And anyway, the next thing I learned was that it is common practice, and this is not hidden. This is common practice for if you have an attorney and they have a great lawsuit and they're going to win you, like my ex-wife was going to win a few $1,000,000, that attorney will go to the other person who you're suing and make a deal with their attorney and take money under the table, take a few $1,000s under the table, and then screw you over on your case and tell you you don't have a case. Or what our attorney did, um, what was his name? Uh, Armin something in Portage, Indiana. Sarkeesian, Armin Sarkeesian. He waited for the statute of limitations to expire and kept saying that he submitted the paperwork to the court, and he kept ignoring my ex-wife and I for months at a time. Then we said we were going to find another attorney, And we did not know the deadline to issue the paperwork was coming up in a few months because the statute of limitations was going to expire to file the lawsuit. And he said not to worry about it. He's pushing it in. We didn't hear from him for 5 months. And then he came back and said that there was no lawsuit because a trustee of a trust has full immunity and can do whatever he wants with the money because legally, as a trustee, it's his personal money, and he can disobey all trust law because they're not enforced and disobey all everything in the contract, which we know is not true. But that's why our attorney would never respond to us on record. He would bring my wife into the office and say something like that. And when we looked for another attorney is when we found out what he did. I called the disciplinary commission, and here this is another thing I found out. I called the disciplinary commission on his activity, and later I would call the disciplinary commission on 2 judges for their illegal activity. And the disciplinary commission, when they got my letter along with the full report, along with text messages and all of that stuff, which would take weeks to go through, the day they got it, they dismissed it and contacted him and let him know that we reported him and what was in the report. Then we got contacted we got a letter from them that was mailed out the same day they got the report, saying that there was nothing in there that they could go after him with. This was so bad that other attorneys here, and I'm not going to tell you who, I have inside sources. Everyone, and they don't know each other, everyone told me the same thing, and they confirmed to me how it works. That the disciplinary commission takes a payout from these attorneys. As soon as they got that, they contacted him and negotiated a payout so not to go after him. A personal untrackable donation of cash funds. Then after that, they actually protected him from what we submitted. Yeah. And then there was a new woman from the ethics committee or ethics commission, something like that, for attorneys who just took over, and unfortunately, she's doing the same thing. It's like this with the committee that is supposed to regulate and keep attorneys in check, and then there's a separate one for the judges, and they do the same thing. And again, people in Indiana act like this is no big deal, like this is just normal, and they say it's like that everywhere. They even make fun of California, saying it's worse in California. I'm like, you do realize that this is number one for this type of corruption, right? California's corruption rate is 0.3%. The corruption rate here is something like 23%. And almost none of it is reported. That's how bad it is here. But that's what they do to the people here is they keep them focused on other things, and they gaslight them and make them think that everywhere else is worse and that they're fortunate to be here. They have no idea that they're in the most unhappy, least educated, most corrupt state in the United States. Anyway, later on, I found a place called Craft Auction Services in Valparaiso, Indiana. I found they were doing something called chill bids or ghost trades. This is legally a form of wire fraud. Well, there is someone who did this who was guilty of about 24 cases of this, and he got over a decade in prison. This guy, his name's John Kraft of Kraft Services, who owns the company, literally guilty of hundreds of thousands of cases of wire fraud. I found this, I tracked him down, and he refused to correct the situation. My ex-wife worked there, and he said that he's going to put her in prison, and said, call the call the police boys, put the cuffs on her, saying it was illegal for her to have helped me report him for illegal activity. Is that funny? White males out here do that a lot. I dealt with one with a trucking company who said that shit. Everyone here, they're so narcissistic, they think they could break all these laws. But if they get upset with you because you report them for breaking the law, then they could call the cops and have them put the cuffs on you. I've heard this dozens of times. It's really weird. But that's what happens when you live in an area with an IQ around average of 95 and there's no law enforcement or functional government. Anyways, I reported this guy to multiple sources, and this one I'll make a full video on. But when the Attorney General and everyone found that this guy, and the investigation showed that he really was guilty of committing more wire fraud than anyone else in American history, they covered it up. I don't have any inside resources for this. I just have people who are very knowledgeable on it, who work inside this field, and they said the same thing basically as what happened at the other place. But I did not get this one confirmed. But apparently, it's common practice for this as well for people like the prosecutor to make under the table deal with these people and take a cash payout so not to prosecute them, because this guy would have gotten a few decades in prison. And it turned out this guy was involved with a lot of illegal activity. Well, chances are really, really high that he's involved in the same type of government corruption that these judges are involved in. You know, we had a judge called Mary Harper, and it looked like she was involved in human trafficking. And with her, she was an evil, evil judge. She got away with, um, anyway. Well, I'll get to that later. But that looks like why he got away with it. The next thing I discovered was judges out here, like who I just said, Judge Harper and another guy called Jester or Jester or something like that out of Lake County, is that it's common practice for them to change and edit. Oh, wait, not Chidester or whatever his name is, but with Judge Harper out of Porter County, she would look at them and go like this, and then say whatever she wanted. Like, I know you're innocent, but I don't care because I don't like you, and would sentence that person to time, and then go like this and have them start recording again. And this was very normal for her. She did this for decades. She put innocent people away. People who should have gotten 6 months on probation, she gave them like 11 years, 5 years, like in probation or prison, and then it just like she always over sentenced everybody. And I once saw her say, "Well, I know you don't have a criminal record, but we're just going to say you do anyway and use it as a aggravated, what you might call it." What? I saw her do this. She was a very evil person. So I reported her for all that stuff, and nothing. Turned out that she's been reported a lot. And they finally went in the courthouse, and they found that she was guilty of a lot of stuff, and it never left the courthouse. I got sources, again, they would know, that told me that it was extremely severe what she did, like the rest of her life in prison. And I think they may have caught her on the human trafficking and maybe some drug trafficking, maybe. But they very likely ran into her tens of thousands of cases of basically treasonous acts in the courtroom because she committed them daily. So instead, they asked her to step down, and then she ended up dying of breast cancer shortly after that. And a very, very evil judge has replaced her. Very evil person with the same name, Mary. But it's only assumptions. The only thing I know is that she was caught, and that even my attorneys that were working to go after her said that basically this would be the most corrupt judge that would ever have been caught in our history. So we have two people now. We have someone who committed more wire fraud than anyone else in American history, and then we have a woman who was already down. The books are banned and removed, but she is already known as the most corrupt judge in American history. And she died, natural causes, cancer. She lived a full, fun life, the life of a spoiled boomer. Everything handed to her, no consequences. But yeah, when I found out that they caught her and that they let her go, that was scary. That was scary. That's why there's no confidence in the system in Indiana, is because things like that are not made public and they don't go after them. So we know. It's like, okay, there's no correction here. We know for a fact that they hide everything. It's a zero confidence state. No one has confidence in the state. It's just something. It's really something. Let's see. What's another thing I found out while out here? Um, there's virtually no law enforcement. Um, State troopers are okay, but very lazy. Local police departments can be very bad. There are some, like in Gary, Indiana, where they're just overworked. The corruption rate is low. And when you hear about the things the cops do there, the corruption is just like, bah. You know what I mean? It's just, it's really like, okay, whatever. While there are other um, departments like Portage, Indiana, and Lake Station, Indiana, where they're so corrupt and so bad, you hear about the average thing they do, and you just wouldn't believe it. These guys are drug dealers. I know that for sure. And Portage PD, at least 7 years ago, all of their department was just out of their damn minds, especially the older people around boomer age were just crazy. They have Gen Xers who work there, and they're boomer minded, and they just do whatever they want. They falsify all police reports, and there's no correction. There's just no correction there. But when it comes to law enforcement out here, just know that you're not is not a functional person who can think and look at something and figure something out that's common sense. They're very unstable people who somehow they know someone in government, and they're like, you know what, we're going to give you the honor of having this badge to get away with more illegal activity. That's how it works here. It's not like these people want to be a police officer and help the community, and they go through training, they leave the academy, they put in their application, and then they get into a law enforcement agency that gives badges. It's not a law enforcement agency. These people are they are thugs, and I don't mean that as far as all cops. I mean they are literally thugs. Um, they're bad people. Now there are younger kids there now, like in their 20s, and they seem cool. And I hope they don't become corrupt like the older officers. But those departments are very, very scary. I was once called by the acting watch commander at the time, yelling at me because I called in on a drunk driver hit and run, and he said that he didn't want to work and he didn't want his officers to have to work and do paperwork. And I yelled at him. I had to yell at him over the phone not to ever call me again because he's having mental issues and doesn't like his job. He needs to contact his representative and ask to change the law if he doesn't like it, or contact his therapist, but to never effing contact me again because he's angry that I am using my or acting within my civil um what is it acting in a civil obligation, and he does not want to fulfill his obligation. And I asked him, I was like, "Do you understand?" He's like, "Yeah, yeah." I was like, "Good, don't ever do that again." And I hung up. I was pissed. It was recorded, and I cannot find the recording. And I tried to get the recording from them, but they refused to even admit that they had that interaction. There was another time the guy yelled at my wife. He got in her face. That's assault. And I was ready to jump him. The cop was definitely high. But he went there to fill out a report, and he yelled, and basically he said that he didn't want to have to work, and he assaulted her. He got like assault is when you get someone and threaten them and get within like a few inches of them. And then when I said something, he yelled at me, which is again an assault toward me. And when I contacted them about that, they erased the footage, and also the complaint against him that I filled out has disappeared. But he had all these tattoos from what do you call it? And I'm totally serious. This is an adult male. He's in his 20s, but he was like acting like that, literally crying because he didn't want to have to work. And he had the Boondock Saints tattoos on his body, an adult. And I'm like, oh my god, this is crazy. It's like when you get one of those bullies that's really into comic books and stuff like that, and they want to be like a superhero, and they got a short temper, and this guy had a badge. So I need to find out who that is actually and put together a full report on that. I already have a full report somewhere on it, but let me see what else. What else did I run into out there? There are very few things that actually happened. Oh, there's no fire marshal. When I moved there, I went through the whole county and not a single location had a valid, up-to-date fire extinguisher. Not a single one. And nobody cared. And everyone, Walmart, stores at the mall, Cold Stone, all of them said that they were not responsible for their fire safety because they hire a company to handle their fire extinguishers for them. Every single one of them said that. All of them. I'm talking about like over 20. Wasn't that crazy? This was in 2016. Again, they were completely serious. They really thought that because they hired a company to handle their fire extinguishers, that they were not in any way liable or responsible for their fire safety and all that legal stuff within on their own property. Yeah. I called the fire marshal, and each time I gave him a location that day, he said, "Wow, that's crazy. I was just there yesterday. Wow, that was crazy." He just happened to just be at every location just yesterday. And this guy was just BSing me. That was for Porter County, Indiana. But these extinguishers were about 7 years old, so they had expired a while ago. I start calling up and pushing him, and within I think 4 months, definitely by about a year, I saw a complete change because I started posting stuff online and tagging him and posting reviews on him in those places, and that finally got it done. Let's see what else. Again, this is just norm to people in Indiana. This is just normal, and everything I'm telling you was within like the first year, except for the craft services thing. That was a few years ago, right when COVID started. Um, that's everything I could think of for now, off the top of my head. There are no journalists out here, none. Um, every news source out here is connected to government officials. Like that corrupt Judge Harper. There were so many news articles about her that were completely fabricated. Her replacement, completely fabricated. Everything there, every news source out here is fake and just creates just false stories about basically how these government officials are absolute gods and amazing, and it's just ridiculous because you read the stuff and it's like reading Nazi propaganda, and that's the only thing I can think of. It's like, wow, this is like North Korea type stuff, you know. Um, But yeah, I could not find a single news source out here, and it turns out that there aren't any. But representatives and senators, they do everything they can do. And basically, those are the ones that care. Your representatives and senators tend to care because the area of government they're in is where they create law. So they're there to create change. They see a they see problems, they want to fix it. The other branches of government are more about having power. So you have the executive branch, which is about enforcing law, but they don't care about law. So they don't know it, but they act out of their fucking minds. Then you have the judicial branch as far as judgment on those who have broken the law, and they like to um, weigh that authority around and abuse it. They don't care about law. A lot of them don't even know law. The issue here is the pool of people is very small, and none of them are good or educated people. So imagine if you grab 1,000,000 people, you give them all an IQ of 95. They all have narcissistic disorders. They all because they're all in the same gene pool. So they all have severe disorders that have to do with bullying and mistreating people and stealing and being dishonest without fear of consequences. So you gotta grab 1,000,000 people. That's genetically in all of them, but you need judges and you need lawyers and you need cops. So people within that pool, you have to bring the standard all the way down in order to put people in those positions. And that's how it was explained to me um, by the people here and by the feds when I was turning these people in. So at that point, it's like, well, what can you do? You really can't do anything. But yeah, that's the stuff that I never really got to publish. The government really made me busy, and then my ex wife really just started destroying me with all of that abuse and poison and everything. So I can never function properly or get the stuff out there. So that's what it's like. That's what it's like to live in Northwest Indiana.